The storm chased Mira Rowan long before she reached the mountains. Snow battered the windshield in frantic sideways streaks, each gust of wind shoving the old truck as if trying to force her back down the narrow road. The headlights carved shallow tunnels through the wideout, but even they seemed to drown under the weight of the blizzard. Mira's fingers tightened around the steering wheel, the leather cold beneath her touch, her palms damp with a careful tension she refused to acknowledge. The world outside was a whirl of white chaos, yet something about the isolation soothed a part of her that cities never could. The deeper she climbed into the mountains, the more she felt the noise of the world slip from her shoulders, replaced by a quiet that rested somewhere deep in her bones. Her jet-black hair fell around her shoulders in loose waves, catching faint glimmers from the dashboard lights, framing those sharp blue eyes that always seemed to see more than she admitted. The road narrowed to a single dark thread beneath her headlights, the wind howling like some unseen thing calling her name. She should have felt afraid. Instead, she felt watched. Not with danger, with expectation. As if the night waited for her arrival. When Mira finally reached the small wood cabin tucked between towering pines, she felt a strange shift in the air, something colder than the snow, something older than the wind. She sat for a moment in the silence of the engine's rumble, listening to the blizzard slam against the trees, swallowing sound and light until the world felt suspended. Her photography assignment wasn't worth all this, but instinct had pushed her here, a quiet pulse in her chest that insisted she needed to return to these mountains. She stepped out into the storm, boots sinking into the thick, fresh snow, the freezing wind cutting across her cheek like a whisper. Every breath she exhaled turned into pale mist that seemed to disappear too quickly, as if stolen by the hungry cold. The cabin's wooden steps groaned under her weight, and for a moment she paused, staring into the tree line where shadows twisted in the storm. Something moved out there, just a flicker, a darker shape against the dark, but when she blinked, the forest returned to its swirling white emptiness. It wasn't until she turned toward the cabin door that she saw them. Two shapes collapsed in the snow near her porch, their bodies curled toward one another, their silhouettes barely distinguishable beneath the heavy snowfall. Mira froze, breath catching painfully in her throat. Wolves. One white as fractured ice. The other black as a night with no moon. Their chests rose and fell in shallow, trembling breaths, steam rising in thin ribbons from their fur. Injured. Dying. The storm clawed at them mercilessly. A shiver of instinctive fear crawled up Mira's spine, because even half dead, wolves were wolves. Wild. Dangerous. But another part of her, softer and more stubborn, pushed through the fear. The part that hated seeing anything suffer alone. The part that had been alone too many times. The part that whispered, "Help them." She stood at the edge of the porch, snow swirling around her ankles, heart pounding to the rhythm of the storm. She didn't know why, but she felt it. If she walked away, something inside her would break. And if she saved them, everything might change. Mira's breath shuddered in the cold air as she approached the two fallen wolves. The snow around them was stained with faint streaks of dark, half-frozen blood, their fur clumped from the storm's relentless touch. She knelt cautiously, her knees sinking deep, and reached out a trembling hand that hovered inches above the white wolf's shoulder. He didn't move, but the black wolf did. A low, warning rumble vibrated deep in his throat, barely audible over the roaring wind. Mira froze again. Every instinct screamed that she should step back, close the cabin door, and let nature take its course. Wolves weren't strays. Wolves weren't safe. But the sound wasn't as fierce as it should have been. It was weak, protective, directed not at her but toward the wolf beside him. "I'm not here to hurt you," she whispered, her voice a cracked breath in the icy air. She didn't know why she spoke to them as if they could understand, but something in their bodies, something in the way the black wolf's gaze flicked to hers, made her believe they did. Dragging them inside was exhausting. The wolves were heavier than they looked, muscles dense beneath matted fur, bodies limp with pain. Mira's arms trembled with the effort, her breath coming out in raw gasps that misted the air as she heaved the white wolf across the threshold. The moment his body crossed into the warmth, the black wolf surged upright with a sudden, agonized snarl, only to collapse again beside his companion. But it wasn't a threat. It was instinct. He was guarding the white wolf even in weakness. Once both were inside, Mira shut the door against the raging storm, the cabin suddenly too quiet except for the deep, uneven sounds of their breathing. The fire flickered weakly in the stone hearth, shadows dancing across the walls like restless specters. She backed away slowly, muscles tensed, watching them. The black wolf lifted his head, snow melting off him in tiny streams, and locked eyes with her, eyes too sharp, too aware. As if he was memorizing her face. As if he was judging her intentions. Night settled over the cabin like a heavy blanket, thick with silence and tension. Mira sat on the edge of her small bed tucked in the corner, every sense tuned to the pair of wolves lying near the fire. The soft crackle of flames did little to warm the cold knot in her stomach. Sleep refused to come. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the weight of their gazes on her, felt the strange hum in the air that hadn't existed before. She kept replaying the moment she saw them in the snow, the way their bodies leaned toward one another, the silent devotion in their suffering. It struck something deep in her, something she couldn't name. As the storm howled outside and the fire cast shifting light across the wolf's fur, Mira wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady her heartbeat. She wasn't afraid of them anymore. Not exactly. What unsettled her was the feeling blooming quietly in her chest. A sense that she hadn't just saved two animals. She had opened her door to something else entirely. Something watching. Something waiting. By morning, the storm had buried the world in a thick, undisturbed silence. The cabin's windows were rimmed in frost, and pale light spilled across the wooden floorboards where the wolves lay. Mira moved cautiously, her boots softly brushing the ground as she approached the white wolf. His breathing was shallow but steadier. A deep gash stretched across his side, the fur around it stiff with dried blood. She fetched warm water and clean cloths, her hands trembling as she knelt beside him. The black wolf rose immediately, his lips peeling back in warning, though the growl was more pained than threatening. Mira's heartbeat thudded heavily as she lifted her hands in a slow, careful surrender. "I need to help him," she murmured. Her voice barely carried across the room, but something in it made the black wolf falter. His growl faded to a low rumble, his sharp golden eyes tracking every movement she made. Permission, not trust, not acceptance, just permission. But it was enough. Mira's fingers worked gently through the white wolf's fur, the warmth of his body seeping into her palms. The closer she leaned, the more she sensed something beneath the surface. An energy, a quiet pulse that tingled faintly against her skin. She told herself it was adrenaline, or imagination, or the crackling fire at her back. Anything but what it truly felt like. The wolf's eyes fluttered open once, pale and luminescent, landing on her with a depth that made her breath catch. He didn't bare his fangs. He didn't tense. He simply watched her, as if trying to place her in a memory he hadn't lived yet. Mira found herself speaking softly to him as she cleaned the wound, her voice dipping into a tone she didn't recognize. Calm, gentle, protective in a way she had never allowed herself to be. The black wolf paced in slow, limping circles near them, never fully turning his back to Mira, never fully challenging her either. The cabin air felt charged, like the quiet moment before lightning strikes. After tending to the wound, Mira sat back on her heels, exhaustion settling into her bones. She didn't expect the soft brush of fur against her hand, the white wolf moving weakly, pressing his muzzle into her palm as though offering silent gratitude. A warmth rippled up her arm, threading through her chest, settling somewhere she couldn't ignore. Her pulse quickened, and she swallowed hard, unsure why such a simple gesture felt intimate. The black wolf stopped pacing, his gaze flickering between them, something dark and conflicted simmering behind his eyes. Mira pulled her hand back slowly, breath uneven, her heart beating too loudly in the small room. She didn't understand what was happening, not the warmth in the white wolf's eyes, not the tension in the black wolf's posture, not the way the cabin suddenly felt too small for the three of them. All she knew was that she had crossed an invisible line. One choice. One night. And now her fate was tangled with two creatures who were far more than wolves. and the storm outside had nothing on the one beginning to rise inside her. The storm weakened by evening, but the cabin remained wrapped in a silence so thick it felt almost sacred. Mira moved about quietly, lighting lanterns and adding wood to the fire, though her eyes never strayed far from the wolves. The white wolf's breathing had grown steadier, though every rise and fall of his chest still tugged at her emotions more sharply than she understood. The black wolf lay near him, a dark sentinel whose gaze followed Mira with unwavering scrutiny. She tried to ignore the prickle that ran across her skin every time she felt his eyes on her, but it was impossible. There was something in the way he watched her, assessing, measuring, almost as if he were deciding whether she was worthy of existing in their proximity. As night drew deeper, the lantern light spilled across the wolf's fur, turning the white coat into silver and the black coat into something that seemed to swallow the light entirely. Mira wrapped a thick blanket around her shoulders and stood at the edge of the room, studying them. There was a heaviness in the air that didn't belong to fear, nor danger, but something unnamed, something that made her pulse flutter in a way she hadn't felt in years. She eventually moved to her bed, though she didn't lie under the covers. Instead, she sat with her knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped around them, unable to retreat fully from everything unfolding before her. The wolves had positioned themselves closer to the fire, their injuries dictating rest, but their presence filled the room to its corners. The white wolf shifted slightly, his fur catching the firelight, and Mira felt an involuntary warmth spread through her chest as she watched him. She had cleaned wounds on animals before, stray dogs, injured birds, even a wild fox once, but none of them had looked at her the way he had. None of them had made her fingers tremble long after she'd pulled them away. She brushed her hair behind her ear, her long black waves falling over her shoulder like spilled ink, and exhaled slowly. The fire popped softly, sending a small ember floating upward like a drifting star. The black wolf tensed at the sound, his golden eyes snapping open, sharp and alert even in exhaustion. Mira's breath hitched. His stare was sharper in low light, piercing through her in a way that left her momentarily breathless. Sleep came in fragments. Mira drifted in and out of dreams laced with shadows and warm breath, with silver eyes watching her through swirling snow and a voice she didn't recognize calling her name from somewhere just out of sight. She woke at one point to find the white wolf lying a few feet closer to her bed, as if he had tried to move in his sleep. The black wolf lay directly between them now, his body a barrier of dark fur and silent warning, but even he didn't prevent the strange warmth that curled inside her when she looked at the white wolf. The moonlight filtering through the frosted windows cast an ethereal glow across the cabin, the shadows deepening into shapes that almost resembled figures standing by the walls, figures that faded when she blinked. She pressed a hand to her racing heart, willing herself to breathe steadily. This was just fear, just worry, just exhaustion playing tricks. But when she lay back down, she couldn't shake the feeling that this night was not a beginning she chose, but one that had chosen her. And somewhere within the blizzard still howling faintly outside, something unseen listened to the rhythm of her heartbeat and waited. Morning bled slowly into the cabin, soft and pale as if the sun itself hesitated to intrude. Mira stretched the stiffness from her limbs, though sleep had been too thin to make the effort worthwhile. The white wolf was awake when she looked toward the hearth. Fully awake. His coat shimmered faintly in the dawn light, and his pale eyes that held an intelligence she could no longer deny, were fixed entirely on her. The connection struck her like a gentle blow, knocking her breath just short of steady. She sat up straighter without meaning to, her fingers curling into the blanket as if she needed something to keep her anchored. The black wolf noticed her movement first, lifting his head sharply, his gaze narrowing with a level of scrutiny that felt almost human in its intensity. Mira swallowed beneath the weight of their attention. She had never been someone people looked at twice, never stood out, never tried to, but the wolf's eyes held her as though she was something valuable, something pivotal, something chosen. Outside the window, snow drifted lazily from the branches, the world beyond silent and untouched, a frozen sanctuary holding its breath. She rose slowly, every step deliberate, careful to avoid startling them. The white wolf didn't tense. Instead, he watched her with a quiet calm, something soft and steady in the way his gaze followed her movements. The black wolf, however, shifted his weight and placed himself ever so slightly in front of the white wolf, his posture protective, though not hostile. Mira knelt a few feet away, letting them decide whether her presence was welcome. Her voice came out low, hushed by the morning's fragile stillness. "You're both still alive. Good." Her words trembled at the end, betraying the emotion she had tried to bury. The white wolf's ears twitched in response, and for a moment, Mira could swear he understood the meaning behind her tone. When she reached out, slowly, he lowered his head, allowing her fingers to slip into the thick fur along his neck. The warmth of his body radiated into her hand, sending a soft, soothing pulse through her skin that almost felt like a heartbeat. She inhaled sharply. The black wolf growled, not threateningly, but warningly, yet the white wolf nudged Mira's wrist gently, almost reassuringly, as if telling her it was all right. The tension between them tightened the air like a drawn bowstring. Mira lingered there, fingertips resting lightly against the white wolf's fur, her breath mingling with the cabin's cold air in faint, trembling clouds. The longer she touched him, the more she felt something unwinding inside her, something she hadn't realized was wound so tightly it hurt. His eyes held hers, deep and ancient in a way that brushed dangerously close to a truth she wasn't prepared to face. The black wolf's posture softened by degrees, though he never looked away, never stopped watching with that fierce protectiveness that both unsettled and grounded her. Mira withdrew her hand slowly, her heartbeat unsteady, and the cabin seemed to exhale with her. She rose to her feet and stepped back, but the connection lingered, stretching across the small distance between them like an invisible thread pulling gently at her chest. She turned toward the window, letting her eyes drift across the snow-covered world outside, but even the silence of the mountains couldn't quiet the storm rising in her blood. She didn't know what the wolves truly were. She didn't know what waited beneath their eyes. The strange occurrences began subtly, slipping into Mira's days like shadows that didn't quite belong to the light. At first, it was the way the wolves' ears snapped upward at sounds she couldn't detect. Little vibrations in the air that made their muscles tighten and their bodies shift as though preparing for a threat only they could sense. They would pause mid-step, staring into some unseen horizon, and Mira would feel a tremor of unease crawl up her spine. The cabin creaked in ways it never had before, carrying whispers that felt too deliberate, too aware. Nights stretched long and restless. She would wake to the soft padding of paws outside her door, sometimes a low rumble, like a warning directed at something out in the forest. Even the wind felt different, sharp and almost sentient, brushing cold fingers across the windows as though trying to get in. Mira told herself it was only her imagination. Stress, fear, isolation. But the air felt charged, alive, and the wolves. They moved as if listening to a world she was only beginning to sense. One evening, as the pale winter moon pressed against the window like a silent watcher, Mira caught a flicker of movement near the fireplace. The white wolf sat in its usual place, massive form coiled in quiet vigilance. Its fur shimmered faintly in the firelight, though something in the room felt heavier, tighter, as if the air were bracing for an unseen shift. She glanced away for just a moment, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders, and when her gaze returned, its eyes were glowing. A soft, unnatural luminescence, subtle but impossibly real, like twin embers lit from within. The sight jolted her breath to a halt. She froze, unsure whether to speak or to flee. The white wolf didn't move, didn't react, simply held her gaze as though waiting to see what she would do next. For a heartbeat, fear tightened around her throat, but woven into that fear was fascination, a tug she didn't understand. Something ancient lived behind those eyes, something she shouldn't be drawn to, but she was. Deeply. The glow vanished as quickly as it appeared, swallowed by the darkness as the white wolf blinked, returning to the steady amber she had grown familiar with. But the impression remained, haunting her, unsettling her, unraveling her certainty of what these wolves truly were. She lay awake long after the fire died, staring up at the wooden beams overhead, listening to the forest breathing outside. Every crackle of ice, every distant howl, pressed against her nerves like fingers tracing the edges of a secret meant for her alone. She tried to reason with herself, tried to grasp onto something logical, but her thoughts spun in circles, always returning to the white wolf's eyes. to the quiet intelligence she had seen, to the sense of being watched, protected, studied. The line between danger and safety blurred, became indistinct. And in that dimness, Mira felt herself crossing a threshold she didn't yet understand, one that led her deeper into their world, deeper into it. Mira didn't expect to find sleep that night, but exhaustion eventually pulled her under, dragging her into dreams that felt too vivid, too close to waking. She found herself on the cabin floor beside the hearth, the fire reduced to a low glow that bathed the room in rust-colored shadows. The air hummed with something warm and ancient. The white wolf lay beside her, closer than it had ever dared before, its breath steady and deep, though there was a subtle tension rippling beneath its fur as if it were caught between two worlds. In the haze of her dream, or what she thought was a dream, she saw it shift. Not fully. Only a flicker, a partial transformation that blurred edges, the curve of a shoulder, the faint outline of a human arm before dissolving again into the silhouette of a wolf. It wasn't a physical change so much as an impression, a slip of reality that made her heart clench with awe and something dangerously close to longing. When she reached out, barely aware of her own movement, the white wolf responded, not with fear, but with a soft exhale that brushed warm across her palm. Its eyes held hers with a depth that felt like a confession. And as the room breathed around them, she felt something shift between them, subtle but undeniable. Words formed in her mind, not spoken aloud, but carried on the hush of the crackling embers. You are not alone here. She didn't know if it came from it, from her own imagination, or from something deeper still, but it wrapped around her like a whisper meant for her heart more than her ears. A swell of emotion tightened her chest. Comfort, fear, vulnerability, and an aching sense of trust she wasn't sure she should offer. Yet she didn't pull away. The white wolf didn't either. They remained locked in that impossible moment, suspended somewhere between dream and reality, where secrets felt close enough to touch. But not everything in the room shared that serenity. A low, irritated growl rose from the corner, the black wolf. Its icy eyes fixed on them, narrowed with something Mira couldn't fully read but instinctively recognized. Possessiveness, suspicion, perhaps even jealousy. It stepped forward, each movement deliberate, claiming space that didn't belong to her. The tender closeness shattered, replaced by tension that tugged harshly through the air. The white wolf didn't move, yet something in its posture shifted, protective, challenging, unwilling to break the connection between them. Mira felt the weight of the black wolf's stare sink into her skin, warning her she had crossed into territory she didn't understand. And for the first time, she realized that whatever existed between her and the white wolf, the black wolf saw it, and it would not allow it to grow unchallenged. The storm came without warning. One moment, the cabin hummed with the faint buzz of the generator. The next, everything fell into suffocating darkness. The wind slammed against the walls, rattling them like some furious spirit begging to be let in. Mira fumbled through the room, reaching for her lantern, her breath visible in the cold that seeped instantly into the cabin. A soft, steady sound approached, the white wolf's pause, quiet but unmistakably purposeful. She stilled, heart pounding, as it came to her side, its massive form dominating the darkness more confidently than any light could. Its presence felt like a shield, an anchor, grounding her in the chaos outside. When she reached out blindly, her fingers brushed the curve of its muzzle, warm, firm, alive. The contact shot through her like a spark, a pulse of heat that spread from her fingertips to her chest, unraveling something she had tried desperately to keep contained. The white wolf didn't flinch. Instead, it leaned into her touch, as if giving her permission to explore the forbidden closeness neither of them dared to acknowledge until now. Its breathing deepened, slow and steady, a rhythm that matched the frantic thump of her heart in a way that made the moment feel almost intimate, dangerously so. The darkness wrapped around them like a cocoon, hiding them from the rest of the world, leaving only the sound of breath, the warmth of fur, the trembling awareness that something had shifted irrevocably. Mira pressed her palm more firmly against it, feeling the strength beneath its coat, the steady rise and fall of its chest. Every inch of her felt suspended, straining toward that warmth, toward it. She should have pulled away. Should have pretended it meant nothing. But in the silence of that powerless night, the truth felt impossible to deny. When the generator sputtered back to life, the sudden light split the moment apart. Mira jerked her hand back, breath shaky, cheeks flushed with a heat that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with the wolf standing before her. The white wolf's gaze found hers instantly, intense and searching, as though trying to decipher what she felt, what she feared. The electricity returned, but the real charge lingered between them, pulsing like a silent heartbeat. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. How could she explain something she didn't understand herself? It stepped closer, brushing past her in a motion that felt almost deliberate, leaving behind a warmth that clung to her long after it moved away. And as she watched it settle in the corner, one truth became clear. The fear she had felt in the beginning was no longer the danger. The danger now was how deeply she was beginning to feel. The following morning dawned pale and eerily quiet, the storm's rage replaced by a world washed clean and glistening with untouched snow. Mira stepped outside only moments after the white wolf nudged her cloak into her hands, a gentle insistence that made her pulse skip. The forest felt different today, alive in a way she couldn't name, each breath of winter air sharp and invigorating. The white wolf led the way, its massive form carving a path through the snow with effortless grace. She followed, drawn not only by curiosity but by a strange trust she couldn't shake. The trees whispered as the wind slipped through them, and for the first time, Mira felt as though the forest itself was aware of her presence. The deeper they went, the more intense the feeling became, prickling along her skin like static. Then she saw it, a glowing circle etched into the snow, bright and pulsing like frost kissed by moonlight. It wasn't fire, nor lantern light, but something older, more primal. The white wolf stopped at its edge, turning to look at her with a gaze that carried both invitation and warning. The black wolf appeared moments later, stepping out from the trees with a heavy, silent authority. Its stare fixed on Mira, unblinking, assessing, challenging her right to be here. Mira's breath caught as she took a hesitant step forward. The circle hummed faintly under her boots, vibrating like a heartbeat. She felt the air shift around her, heavier, charged with an energy that seeped into her bones. These wolves were not guardians of instinct and wilderness alone. They belonged to something mystical, something beyond the realm of ordinary understanding. The black wolf moved closer, its posture rigid, challenging her presence with every inch of its body. The white wolf stepped subtly between them, the motion smooth but undeniably protective. It sent a shiver down Mira's spine. Not fear, but the awareness of a bond forming in ways neither she nor the wolf had spoken aloud. The glowing circle pulsed brighter, as though feeding off the tension. Mira felt her heartbeat sync with its rhythm, drawn inexplicably to the magic beneath her feet. She knew then that stepping into this world was no longer a question of choice. She was already entangled in it, woven into the threads of something ancient and sacred. And as she met the white wolf's gaze, she realized it knew it too. It happened so quickly that Mira wasn't sure if her mind invented pieces of it just to fill the gaps. One moment, the white wolf stood before her, majestic, immense, the embodiment of ancient strength. The next, the air around it rippled like water disturbed by a stone, bending light in ways that made her vision blur. She staggered back, breath swallowed by shock as its form shifted. Not fully, not cleanly, but enough for her to see the truth of it. A broad shoulder, the faint outline of a human torso, fingers where paws had been a heartbeat earlier, eyes burning with a light that was no longer canine. It stood halfway between worlds, a frightening, breathtaking fusion of man and beast. Mira's heart pounded wildly, awe and terror tangling inside her chest until she felt she might collapse beneath the weight of it. The white wolf stepped toward her, slow, cautious, as though fearing she might flee. Its voice, when it reached her, was soft and rough at the edges, like a whisper scraped from ancient stone. She couldn't comprehend the words fully, not yet, but she understood their meaning. Trust me. Its gaze held hers with an intensity that felt like a confession. Not of danger, but of longing. Something inside Mira shifted, loosening in a way that left her unsteady. Her fear didn't vanish, but it changed shape, becoming something deeper, a recognition that the man hidden within the wolf had been reaching for her long before she realized it. She swallowed hard, fighting the tremor in her voice as she reached out a shaking hand, not to touch it, but to let it know she wasn't running. Not from it. But before the white wolf could step closer, a low, venomous snarl cut through the clearing. The black wolf. Its eyes were wild, ice blue and burning with fury. The tension in the air sharpened instantly, slicing through the fragile moment like a blade. The black wolf spoke, not in words, but in the thunderous energy of its stance, in the warning woven into its growl. She is not ready. She is not to be trusted. The white wolf stood firm, unyielding, refusing to retreat or hide what it had revealed. Mira watched the clash between them with her heart lodged painfully in her throat. For the first time, she understood that the stakes were far darker than she imagined. The snow outside pressed against the cabin like a living shroud, muffling every sound and making the world beyond seem impossibly distant. Inside, Mira's pulse thundered in her ears as the white wolf, immense, regal, impossibly alive, shifted its weight with a grace that felt almost supernatural. The glow in its eyes lingered faintly, flickering like twin embers from some ancient flame, and the heat of its presence filled the room with a charged tension she could almost taste. Then, with a voice low, rough-edged yet unmistakably human, it spoke, "I am Cajun, and this is my brother, Rexus." The black wolf emerged from the shadows as if sculpted from the night itself, each movement precise, muscles rippling beneath fur darker than moonless midnight. Rexus's icy gaze fixed on Mira, calculating, unreadable yet terrifyingly intense. Cajun's words carried weight, heavy as centuries of unspoken history, and Mira's breath caught as she realized these were no ordinary wolves. They were ancient, powerful, bound together by more than blood, and hunted by enemies whose cruelty had been honed over generations. The firelight flickered across their forms, highlighting the taut muscles beneath fur, the subtle shifts that betrayed both readiness to strike and the careful restraint of creatures who had survived countless battles together. Her mind raced to comprehend the reality of the situation, her heart thumping wildly as the wolf's presence pressed against her like gravity. She felt simultaneously vulnerable and compelled to step closer, drawn by something she didn't yet understand, an instinctive pull that defied reason. Cajun's gaze softened fractionally, the luminescent glow in his eyes dimming to something warmer, almost tender, and for the first time, Mira sensed a bridge being offered, a bridge into a world she had not known existed, a world she now had no choice but to enter. And standing there, suspended between fear and fascination, she realized that her ordinary life had already ended the moment these wolves chose to trust her, even partially, with the truth of their existence. Cajun's voice grew softer, weaving words that felt like threads drawn from an old, painful memory. "We are twins," he began, each syllable deliberate, each pause weighted with significance. "Our bloodline carries strength, speed, and a power hunted across centuries. The Blackthorn Pack seeks to destroy us, to erase what our ancestors survived to preserve. Their cruelty is meticulous, their patience endless, and they will not stop until we are gone." Rexus stepped forward, a shadowed mirror to his brother's form, his stance protective, unwavering, yet restrained, as though holding back a storm that could consume everything in its path. He did not speak as much as exude a silent warning, his piercing eyes locking with Mira's in a way that made her skin crawl and shiver simultaneously. Mira struggled to breathe as she watched them, realizing that the tension in the room was a living thing, wrapping around her, filling every corner, coiling inside her chest like a pulse she could not escape. Cajun moved closer, and Mira could feel the warmth radiating from his form, subtle but undeniable, as if the very air around him was charged with life and intention. "We have survived countless attacks together," he continued, voice like gravel and silk intertwined. "Through centuries of hunting, exile and bloodshed, only we have endured. Our bond is the one thing that has never faltered. And now you are here, and you matter, more than you know." Mira's hand twitched at her side, a mixture of awe, fear, and unspoken longing tightening her chest. The fire cast shadows across Cajun's face, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw and the luminous depth of his eyes, making him appear both human and something otherworldly, a creature caught between worlds. She realized that the story they told was not simply about survival. It was about legacy, about a connection older than memory, about a power she had stumbled into that demanded both reverence and caution. And yet, for all the danger, for all the threat that the Blackthorn Pack represented, there was an undeniable magnetism radiating from them, pulling her toward a reality she had never imagined, compelling her to see beyond fear into the heart of something that felt impossibly alive and incomprehensibly deep. Mira swallowed hard, her throat dry, her heartbeat a staccato drum in her ears, as the twins continued their measured revelations. Cajun stepped even closer, careful not to intimidate, yet asserting his presence like a force of nature barely contained. Snowflakes clung to his dark hair, melting slowly as warmth radiated from his body, contrasting the frigid air that seeped through the cabin walls. "We trust few," he said quietly, voice low but deliberate, each word pulling her attention inward, demanding comprehension. "And yet, you have acted without hesitation, without fear of what we are, or what may follow." Rexus's growl cut through the quiet, not a threat to her, but a reminder of the vigilance etched into their very being. Mira's pulse raced as she absorbed the truth. These creatures, these beings, had survived centuries of hunters, had walked through blood and shadow together, and had never allowed anyone to pierce the walls around them, until now. The air seemed to thrum with tension, the fire flickering wildly, casting both wolves in alternating light and shadow as if the cabin itself were aware of the fragile trust forming within it. Mira felt something stir deep inside, a blend of fear, fascination, awe, and something dangerously tender she could not name. For the first time, she understood that she was no longer simply an observer. She had become a participant, an anchor, a presence that would shape their choices as much as they would shape hers. And as she met Cajun's glowing eyes, mirrored by Rexus's storm-blue gaze, she realized that the bond she would forge here, in this small cabin amidst the wintered forest, would not only determine her survival but would bind her heart in ways she could not yet comprehend. Morning arrived with a brittle light, pale and grey, filtering through the snow-heavy pines, casting long, trembling shadows across the cabin floor. Mira moved carefully, tending to the wolves' wounds, each motion deliberate, mindful of the fragility of life and the danger that surrounded them. Cajun allowed her close, shifting partially between human and wolf to accommodate her touch, his amber eyes softened but alert, scanning the forest beyond each time her hands brushed his fur. He spoke then, voice low, resonant, threaded with quiet urgency. "The Blackthorn Pack did not attack at random," he explained, the words falling heavy between them like stones. "They are hunters of our bloodline, skilled, patient, relentless. They seek to destroy us, to erase what has survived centuries of exile, secrecy, and struggle. Their cruelty is precise, measured, and impossible to outrun once it has chosen a target." Mira's chest tightened as she absorbed the weight of his confession, realizing that her acts of kindness, her willingness to tend to them, had unknowingly marked her as part of this dangerous equation. Rexus lingered nearby, his black form a tense shadow, every muscle taut, every breath a silent threat to anything that dared approach. Mira could feel the electricity in the air, the forest pressing its watchful gaze against the cabin like unseen eyes, and understood that the Blackthorn Pack's reach was far, their patience endless, their hunger for destruction meticulous. Cajun's words cut through her fear, threading a cold awareness into her marrow. She was no longer a passive human stumbling into danger. She was a participant, entwined with beings who carried both immense power and terrible vulnerability, and who now relied on her to navigate a perilous path she barely understood. As Mira worked, Rexus finally spoke, his voice a low growl, resonant, commanding, each word deliberate yet few, cutting the silence with unspoken authority. "We have lived in shadows to survive," he said, his gaze flicking constantly toward the tree-line as if the forest itself could betray them at any moment. His eyes, pale ice blue and intense, reflected centuries of strategy, battle and survival, hinting at stories he would not yet tell, battles that had scarred his body and soul, victories that had forged him into the twin he was today. Cajun's form shifted subtly in the corner, muscles flexing, a partial transformation revealing the predator beneath the human exterior, a warning that their world was far from tame. Mira felt her heart hammer as the twins' history, hinted at in fragments, began to weave a tapestry of danger, loyalty, and ancient power she had never imagined. Kajin stepped closer again, warmth radiating from him, grounding her against the cold that seeped through the cabin walls. The Blackthorn Alpha is clever, he continued, voice low and steady. He hunts not only for dominance but to extinguish our legacy, the line our ancestors preserved. Every step we take, every shadow we trust, every breath we draw is measured against him. And now, you are part of this. Your presence here matters more than you know, Mira, because you are tied to the choices we must make, the survival we must ensure. The air thickened around her, a mix of fear, awe, and something she could not name, a pulse of energy that threaded between human and wolves, binding her to the reality she had stumbled into. Her hands trembled slightly as she straightened a ragged wound on Kajin's shoulder, feeling the heat beneath her fingers and understanding, without words, the fragile balance of trust, danger, and the unspoken bond that now tethered her to them. The forest pressed closer with every passing minute, silent and observing, yet alive with subtle signs, broken twigs, faint rustling, distant calls, reminding Mira that the Blackthorn Pack's presence was never far, never idle. Kajin knelt beside her, hand brushing hers briefly, grounding her, a tether of warmth and reassurance in a world otherwise filled with menace. Rexus remained a dark sentinel at the edge of the room, his gaze never leaving the tree-line, his posture a coiled warning that danger could arrive on invisible wings. Mira's pulse raced as she took in their presence, the tension between them, the unspoken bond of twinhood, the history that radiated from their every movement, and the subtle emotional threads that seemed to pull her toward Kajin's warmth and Rexus's shadowed intensity simultaneously. The cabin seemed suspended in time, a fragile bubble holding her human fragility against the relentless, ancient force of the wolves' world. Kajin spoke again, softer now, almost reverent. We survived together because we trusted no one, because we knew each other completely, and because we adapted to a life of constant threat. You, Mira, you have entered a world that does not forgive ignorance, but you have not fled. You have shown courage, compassion, and a steadiness that earns you a place among us, however tenuous it may be. Mira's heart constricted at the weight of his words, understanding that her role was no longer incidental. She was part of this story, part of a lineage of survival and power, and part of a delicate balance between humans and creatures whose very existence was intertwined with both violence and loyalty. As the snowflakes brushed against the window, catching the dim light of the cabin, she realized she was tethered not only to their survival but to the quiet, undeniable pull of a bond that was beginning to shape her heart, her instincts, and her understanding of trust, danger, and the extraordinary intimacy of a world she had never imagined she would inhabit. Night fell like velvet over the cabin, the fire casting soft gold across Mira's face as she sat near the hearth, trying to steady her breath. Kajin knelt beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, close enough that his presence settled in her bones. His voice came low, careful. "You're trembling," he murmured. Mira shook her head. "I'm fine. Just thinking." Kajin's eyes narrowed gently. "You don't have to pretend with me. Not tonight." The warmth of his tone loosened something in her chest, and she found herself whispering, "It's hard to know what tomorrow will be." His jaw tightened at that. "I won't let anything touch you." Her breath caught. "Kajin, you can't promise that." "I can," he said softly, leaning just a fraction closer, his gaze tracing her face as if memorizing every line. "And I will." Before Mira could speak, a shadow shifted at the doorway. Rexus stepped in, silent, coiled with tension, his eyes burning in the half-light. Kajin didn't look away from her. Rexus didn't look away from him. The air thickened, and Mira felt caught between warmth and wildfire. Rexus moved further into the room, his voice quiet but edged. "You're awfully close, Kajin." Kajin finally turned his head, tone steady. "She's cold." Rexus's eyes dropped to Mira. "She wasn't shivering until you started hovering." Mira exhaled sharply. "Please, don't start." Rexus's gaze locked on hers. "I'm not starting anything. I'm observing." Kajin's shoulders tensed, but Mira lifted a hand, touching his arm lightly. The contact steadied him, and sent a tremor through her. Rexus saw it. His expression darkened. "So that's it, Rexus murmured, voice low, wounded pride hidden beneath steel. Mira swallowed. I never said. You didn't have to. He stepped closer, not threatening, just present, like a living storm pressing against her senses. I protect you too, he said softly. Not because I must. Because I choose to. Kajin answered him quietly. She isn't something to fight over. Rexus's eyes flicked to her lips, then back to her eyes. Then stop acting like she already belongs to you. Heat rose beneath Mira's skin, not fear, something sharper, more confusing, because the tension in the room wasn't just rivalry. It was something older. Something she could feel in her pulse. The fire cracked sharply, pulling all three of them into a brief moment of stillness. Mira forced out a breath. Both of you, listen. Kajin's attention snapped to her instantly, softening. I'm listening. Rexus's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Say what's in your heart. Her voice trembled. I'm confused. I don't know what I feel yet, but I do know this. She turned to Kajin. You make me feel safe. Seen. Kajin's eyes warmed, but he said nothing, giving her space. She turned toward Rexus. And you make me feel protected in a different way. Stronger somehow. Rexus inhaled sharply, shoulders dropping, some of the tension bleeding from him. Kajin whispered, Mira, you don't owe either of us anything. Rexus added, quieter. But you matter. More than you realize. Mira pressed her hands together, breath shaky. I'm trying to understand all of this. You. Both of you. And myself. The wolves looked at her, really looked, reading her honesty. The jealousy didn't vanish, but something shifted. A fragile truce. A deeper awareness. She saw it in Kajin's softened gaze, in Rexus's guarded respect. And in that moment, she understood her place was no longer at the edges of their world. She was the storm's center, whether she wanted to be or not. The fire had burned down to embers when Kajin finally spoke again, his voice low and rough, like he'd been battling the words inside him. Mira sat cross-legged, staring into the last flickers of orange when he said, Mira, may I tell you something without you pulling away? Her breath hitched. I won't pull away. He moved closer, slowly, giving her every chance to stop him. No one, he whispered, has ever cared for us the way you do. She blinked, startled. Kajin, I just... No, he said gently, shaking his head. You don't understand. Most humans look at us and see what we can do, what we could destroy. You look at us and see who we are. Her voice softened. Because I'm not afraid of you. Something raw flickered in his eyes. That's what frightens me. Mira swallowed, heart pounding. Why? Kajin leaned in, his forehead almost touching hers, their breaths mixing. Because it makes me want things I told myself I could never have. The world narrowed to his eyes, his breath, the warmth of his presence. Her lips parted, but no words came out. And Kajin watched that tiny reaction like it unraveled him. Kajin's fingers brushed hers, slow, gentle, almost testing. If this is too much, Mira whispered. It's not. His breath shuddered. You don't know what you're doing to me. She swallowed. Then tell me. His voice dropped into a vulnerable murmur. You make me hope. You make me want to trust again. You make me feel human. Mira's chest tightened. Kajin. Don't look away, he whispered, and she didn't. Her eyes stayed on his, locked in a fragile magnetic pull. When you touch me, Kajin continued softly, I feel like the world stops hunting me for a moment. Her breath trembled. That's how I feel when you're near. He blinked at her, stunned. Say it again. She hesitated, cheeks warming. You make me feel safe. Kajin exhaled like those words broke something open inside him. Mira, I care for you. More than I should. More than I'm allowed. She didn't pull away. She leaned closer, Kajin's fingers lingered on hers, slower now, careful, as if measuring every heartbeat between them. Mira's chest fluttered, warmth spreading through her with every brush of his hand. She lifted her gaze to his, voice soft, trembling. Kajin, I want this. I want us. His dark eyes held hers, unwavering. Mira, you don't know how long I've waited to hear you say that. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, deliberate, intimate, and she shivered. I promise. I'll do everything I can to keep you safe. To keep you close. Rexus's shadow shifted at the edge of the cabin. His voice low, almost a whisper. Go on. This is yours. Take the space you need. Mira's heart skipped, and she looked to him briefly, seeing no resentment, only understanding. Kajin's hand tightened gently around hers, and she leaned a fraction closer. Thank you, both of you, she murmured. Always, Kajin replied, his voice steady, grounding. But right now, it's just us. Rexus stepped back fully, settling into the dim light, silent, giving them the moment without intruding. Mira exhaled slowly, a shiver of relief and exhilaration weaving through her. And in that quiet, flickering glow, she realized she could finally let her heart begin opening, slowly, naturally, toward the wolf kneeling beside her, who had never let her feel alone. The forest had been hushed for hours, the world cloaked in pristine white, until the storm arrived, not as snow but as violence. Mira pressed herself against the cabin wall, breath shallow, eyes wide, as the wind carried a low, menacing growl that made her chest clench. The blackthorn rivals were moving through the trees. Branches snapped under heavy paws, and fleeting flashes of moonlight revealed glimpses of eyes reflecting danger. Kajin. Rexus, Mira whispered, her voice trembling. They're here. I can feel them. Kajin's jaw tightened, nostrils flaring. Stay low, he commanded softly, his eyes never leaving the shadows outside. Rexus stepped in front of her, a silent shield, his presence coiling around her like steel and ice. Every subtle twitch of their bodies, the tilt of a head, the flex of a shoulder, the flick of an ear, was a message, a promise that she was the center of their fight. Mira's fingers dug into the timber, grounding herself in the tangible reality of their strength, even as terror gnawed at her. She realized, in the same instant, that this fear was laced with something stranger, the raw, undeniable intensity of being cared for with such devotion, even in the teeth of danger. The first attack came in flashes, shadows darting through the whirling snow, teeth and claws glinting in moonlight. Mira's body flattened against the floor, snow seeping into her sleeves, biting her skin, but her eyes never left Kajin and Rexus as they moved with devastating precision. Kajin's voice cut through the storm, low and urgent. Mira, behind the root. Now. She obeyed, heart hammering, as he launched forward, a shadow among shadows, fluid and deadly. Rexus growled, sharp and controlled, his attention slicing toward her for a moment before snapping back to the fight. You're safe, Kajin murmured as he passed near her again, brushing her sleeve. Mira's breath hitched, warmth coiling in her chest despite the cold. Each glance Kajin sent her, each subtle protective tilt from Rexus, drew her into a vortex of connection she could neither explain nor resist. In the chaos, in the roar of teeth and snow, Mira felt the unspoken. She mattered, and this bond, dangerous, electrifying, fragile, was theirs to fight for. When the storm finally subsided, the forest lay scattered with the remnants of combat. Broken branches, claw-marked trunks, the scent of exertion lingering in the crisp air. Mira rose slowly, trembling, every muscle taut, every nerve singing with adrenaline. Kajin stepped close, his hand brushing her shoulder with deliberate grounding, his eyes locking onto hers. You're all right, he whispered, and the simplicity of the words carried centuries of restraint and longing. Rexus remained a sentinel nearby, posture softening just enough to reveal relief, his gaze never leaving her. Mira felt an unfamiliar clarity. The night had changed everything. Fear had drawn her closer, trust had deepened beyond explanation, and something unspoken, thrilling, delicate, infinitely more dangerous, had begun to bloom. She could feel it in a brush of a fingertip, in Cajun's careful attention, in Rexus's silent acknowledgement. The snowflakes resting on her lashes mirrored the new reality. She was now inextricably bound to them, body, mind, and heart. Morning after the storm brought deceptive calm. A grey light filtered through ice-laden branches as Mira moved to gather herbs for Cajun and Rexus. Her hands trembled slightly. She wanted to make up for the violence of the previous night, to contribute rather than merely survive. But a misstep on hidden ice sent a loud crack echoing through the forest. Mira froze, stomach twisting, as a distant howl answered it. Cajun's head snapped toward the sound, eyes narrowing. Mira. His voice was low, not angry, but heavy with warning. Rexus's fur bristled, eyes hard, his entire frame a tense coil of anticipation and threat. Mira swallowed hard. I didn't mean to, she stammered, voice breaking slightly. Cajun's gaze softened for a moment, but the disappointment in his stance remained palpable. She realized with a sinking heart that her human error might have jeopardized everything they had fought to protect. Cajun approached cautiously, voice low and steady, yet tinged with an edge Mira had rarely heard. "Do you understand what you just did?" he asked, though the words carried more sorrow than accusation. Mira shook her head, eyes wide, her breath shaky. Rexus circled behind her, close enough that the heat of his presence pressed against her back, and she felt the protective weight of him more tangibly than ever before. "It's not just about you," Rexus growled softly, almost to himself, but Mira heard the warning. "Every move matters here. Every sound can change everything." Mira's hands clenched into fists at her sides, nails digging into her palms. I wanted to help," she whispered. "I was trying to." The words faltered, fragile against the intensity of their gazes. Cajun's dark eyes softened, but the tension did not ease. "Trying isn't enough," he murmured. "Not in this world." The weight of their judgment, of their power, of the trust she could lose, pressed down on her like ice. Yet, in that suffocating tension, she felt the simmering pulse of connection still alive, fragile but persistent, begging for courage. Hours stretched with the slow dragging of grey light against frost-streaked windows. The cabin was filled with the subtle sounds of wind brushing ice-laden boughs, the distant creak of snow-laden branches, and the almost imperceptible shift of Cajun and Rexus as they moved. Cajun remained close, though distant, his presence heavy with restrained disappointment. Mira began, voice quivering, but Cajun shook his head gently, cutting her off with a soft, deliberate hand gesture. Rexus leaned closer, his breath warm against the back of her neck, eyes flicking to Cajun with a tension that was both challenging and protective. Mira's chest tightened as she realized the full weight of her place here. Not merely survival, not merely companionship, but the fragile, terrifying reality that trust and love intertwined could be lost with the slightest misstep. Her hands rested on her lap, knuckles white, as she drew in a deep, steadying breath. This world demanded courage, not just to run or hide, but to allow the heart to exist fully amidst danger, vulnerability, and the consuming intensity of creatures who had begun to care for her beyond measure. Twilight fell over the forest like a heavy curtain, the cabin a faint silhouette against drifting snow. Cajun and Rexus stood near the threshold, their bodies taut, radiating a strength Mira could almost feel pressing against her chest. Inside, she moved cautiously, eyes scanning the subtle shifts of the room. Rexus's gaze lingered on her with unspoken questions. Cajun's jaw flexed as if every word, every thought, every hesitation was a battle against centuries of restraint. Mira's pulse mirrored the slow, deliberate rhythm of their movements, each a question, a threat, a promise. We have to decide," Cajun said finally, voice low and steady, though heavy with strain. "About you, about us." His eyes held hers, searching for the honesty that had no words, only resonance between heartbeats. Rexus's posture shifted, not in challenge, but acknowledgement, a silent force backing the gravity of Cajun's declaration. Mira's breath caught, chest tightening as the weight of their deliberation pressed against her ribs. She was no longer merely a human girl, but the axis around which two ancient lives now balanced. Cajun stepped slightly closer, fingers brushing hers briefly. Mira, he said, voice roughened with the edge of emotion he barely controlled. We are bound by rules older than you or I. Yet, I cannot ignore what you mean to me. Rexus's eyes narrowed faintly, a storm in ice, before softening with reluctant respect. Mira's heartbeat fluttered in her chest. Cajun, she whispered, uncertain. I don't want to make things complicated. He shook his head, lips barely moving. You've already changed everything. And yet, you've never asked for anything, never demanded, never tried to claim. That makes it possible to feel something real. Rexus moved a half-step closer, protective, asserting presence. Yet his voice was quieter now. We protect her, because she deserves it. Both of us. And she needs to know, she is wanted. The room seemed suspended, every glance, every shift, every shallow intake of breath a universe of unspoken truths. The night stretched on, shadows growing long across the floorboards. Mira felt Cajun's warmth beside her, the subtle weight of his presence anchoring her fear and desire. Rexus lingered at the edge, energy protective, almost tangible, a current brushing her skin with silent warning. She started, swallowing against the knot in her throat. Cajun's eyes softened, voice a gentle rumble. You are more than safe, Mira. You are understood. Rexus's gaze flicked between them, a quiet acknowledgement that the choice of the heart could not be denied, even by ancient law. Mira exhaled slowly, fingers brushing Cajun's hand, her chest lighter, her mind clearer. In the shared stillness, she realized, she had become indispensable, not by power, but by simple human courage, care, and presence. And in that realization, love rooted itself quietly, naturally, dangerously, in the spaces between them, a delicate tide rising between human and wolf alike. The forest roared under the blizzard's fury, snow whipping in violent arcs that stung Mira's skin and clawed at her hair. Through the swirling white, shadows moved like whispers of doom, the rival pack pressing closer with predatory precision. Cajun crouched low beside her, voice rough over the howl of wind. Stay with me, Mira. Every step you take. I feel it. Rexus shifted beside them, his wolf form dissolving back into broad shoulders and icy eyes. They're circling, he growled. 3 to the left. 1 behind. Mira scanned the storm, breath trembling. I can see their rhythm, the breaks between their movements. Cajun's gaze snapped to her, sharp and amazed. Show me. She pointed through the white curtain. There. When the wind dips, they change direction. If you flank then. He nodded instantly. Good. That's good. Her heart hammered, but the wolf's nearness steadied her. I'm not slowing you down, am I? She whispered. Rexus gave a short, fierce laugh. You're redirecting the kill zone. The cold bit into her bones, yet she moved with purpose, making herself small, deliberate, guiding. Cajun leaned closer, breath warm against the storm. You're not just surviving this, Mira. You're leading it. And with that, the battle ignited. Cajun surged forward, a tempest of muscle and instinct, fangs and claws flashing beneath the snow-dulled moon. Rexus flanked him, moving like shadow incarnate, each stride precise, each growl a command. Mira ducked behind a fallen pine, snow slicing her face. Cajun, you're right, she shouted. His wolf head snapped to her voice, veering just as an attacker lunged. Rexus barked sharply, translating her warning into movement. Mira, keep talking, he called. Your eyes see angles we miss. She peeked out again, pulse racing. There's a ridge. Use it. Push them uphill. Cajun's voice, half human, half wolf, echoed through the storm. I hear you. Another shadow lunged near her hiding place. Mira threw a handful of snow, distracting it for 2 precious seconds. Over here, she yelled, drawing its attention away from the wolves. Rexus blurred past, intercepting the threat with a snarl. Don't take risks like that, he barked, breath steaming. You needed an opening, she shot back. Cajun landed beside her, chest heaving, eyes burning gold. Mira, every move you make shifts the battlefield. And she realized. He meant it. The blizzard reached its peak, snow blurring reality into an impressionistic dance of shadow and fury. Cajun blurred from wolf to human mid-leap, catching a blow with his bare hands. "Rexus, left flank," he shouted. "Already there," Rexus answered, his voice almost swallowed by the wind. Mira braced herself against a tree, trembling, not from cold, but from the ferocity of everything. "Cajun, behind you," she cried. He pivoted instantly, her voice anchoring him like a tether. Rexus reached her side, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Breathe, Mira. Your fear isn't weakness, it sharpens your sight." She swallowed hard. "I'm trying. I just..." Cajun rejoined them, snow clinging to his hair, chest rising and falling. "You kept us alive," he said quietly. "Both of us." The storm around them shook, then slowly quieted as the last enemy limped into the trees. Mira's breath shuddered. "Is it over?" Rexus exhaled, eyes softening. "For now." Cajun stepped closer, brushing a strand of frozen hair from her cheek. "You fought with us, Mira." Her heart fluttered. "I just followed my instincts." "Exactly," Cajun murmured. "And that's why you belong here." In the snow-laden quiet, something profound rooted itself between them. Fragile, dangerous, real. The forest lay still in the aftermath, the storm retreating, leaving a crystalline hush that made the world feel fragile and sacred. Mira sat near the fire, fingers brushing the warmth of the mug she held, chest heaving from adrenaline still unspent. Cajun knelt beside her, human form fully embraced, eyes dark and liquid with the kind of depth she had only glimpsed in the storm. "You were incredible," he murmured. Mira blinked. "I was shaking the whole time." "You still acted," he said softly. "That's what matters." Rexus lingered near the doorway, arms crossed loosely, watching her with a steady, unreadable gaze. "You guided us," he added, voice low. "Half the moves we made. Yours." Mira's breath hitched. "I just reacted." Cajun shook his head. "No. You saw the field." Rexus inclined his head. "And we trusted your eyes." The fire popped softly, filling the quiet. "You're both giving me too much credit," she whispered. Cajun leaned closer. "No, Mira. We're finally giving you the credit you deserve." Rexus's eyes softened. "You saved us." Mira lowered her gaze, pulse fluttering. In that moment, she felt something shift, subtle, warm, undeniable, born from shared danger and unspoken promises smoldering in the firelight. Cajun's hand reached for hers, tentative, a question in the feather-light brush of fingers. Mira inhaled sharply, lifting her gaze to meet his. "Is this all right?" he asked softly. She nodded once. "Yes." The single word changed everything. Rexus shifted slightly, his expression gentler than she'd ever seen. "You don't need to be afraid to reach for him," he said. "Or for me. Not of us." Mira swallowed. "I'm not afraid. I'm just overwhelmed." Cajun let out a breath. "So are we." The firelight cast warm gold across his features, revealing vulnerability beneath the strength. "You looked at me tonight," he whispered, "and I knew you trusted me." "I did," she murmured. "I do." Rexus's voice lowered but remained steady. "You changed how we fight. How we think." Mira turned slightly toward him. "I didn't mean to change anything." "You didn't force anything," Cajun said. "You just were you." The room felt suspended in soft, breathing silence. Mira's fingers curled around Cajun's. "I'm still learning what any of this means." "We'll learn with you," Rexus whispered. Warmth rippled through her, delicate but fierce, a slow burn understanding taking root. Hours slipped by in quiet conversation and lingering glances, the fire crackling low. Mira leaned slightly toward Cajun, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath beside her. "You're warm," she whispered, almost surprised. He smirked softly. Perk of being what I am. Rexus took a seat a few feet away, posture relaxed but protective. Do you feel safe now? He asked. Mira nodded. With you both? Yes. Kajin exhaled, relief softening his features. Good. The silence that followed was gentle, intimate, not strained. I thought I'd freeze out there, she admitted. Rexus shook his head. We wouldn't have let that happen. I know, she said, voice quiet. That's why I wasn't scared. Kajin's hand brushed her knee lightly, hesitant, reverent. Mira, he murmured, you matter to us. Her breath caught. Both of you. Rexus nodded once. In different ways. But yes. She looked between them, heart swelling with something tender, fierce, new. Kajin whispered, we don't expect answers tonight. Rexus added gently, just honesty. Mira smiled faintly, warmth blooming deep in her chest. I'm still here, she whispered. That's my honesty. And in the firelit hush, that was enough, for now, for all of them. The forest lay quiet in the aftermath of the blizzard, the world washed in silver, crystalline light that glinted off the snow like scattered stars. Mira moved carefully through the clearing, feeling the crunch beneath her boots and the lingering chill on her cheeks, but the cold could not touch the warmth that had settled deep in her chest. Kajin walked beside her, his presence calm, deliberate, every step measured and protective, a shadow of the fierce wolf still lingering in his eyes. It's beautiful, Mira whispered, her voice soft, almost lost in the wind. Kajin glanced down at her, a small, wry smile tugging at his lips. Not as beautiful as this moment, he said quietly, letting his fingers brush hers briefly. Rexus moved a few paces behind, silent, vigilant, his icy gaze tracking every movement in the treeline, but there was no tension in it now, only watchful respect. Mira exhaled, feeling a rare sense of safety, and asked hesitantly, do you think it will always be like this? Kajin's eyes softened, glimmering with a mixture of warmth and something fiercer. It can be, he said, if we keep choosing it. If we keep choosing each other. Kajin stopped in the center of the clearing, his gaze fixed entirely on her. The wind stirred, tugging at her hair, carrying the scent of pine and ice, but it could not drown out the thrum of connection between them. He extended his hand, slow, deliberate, and Mira stepped forward without a second thought, pressing her fingers into his. Their eyes locked, unspoken words passing between them like fire in the quiet. Mira, he said softly, voice low and steady, you are mine by choice, by the pull of something neither of us can deny. Mira's lips curved into a playful, confident smile. I think I'm glad I followed my heart then, she whispered. Rexus shifted slightly behind her, shoulders relaxed, a faint, approving smirk tugging at his lips. Well, you've made your choice, he said with a soft chuckle. Kajin's eyes twinkled. And I plan to remind you of it every day, he added teasingly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Mira laughed, her heart soaring. Good. I wouldn't have it any other way. The three of them moved through the snow-draped forest, Kajin at her side, Rexus guarding their rear, and Mira felt a quiet certainty settle over her like a cloak. She could feel the wolves' strength, their loyalty, their ancient majesty, but more importantly, she could feel the tangible reality of love, something gentle, human, and enduring, even amid the remnants of danger. Kajin leaned down suddenly, brushing his lips lightly across Mira's forehead, a soft, intimate gesture that made her shiver with warmth. Forever yours, he murmured, eyes sparkling with both mischief and devotion. Mira tilted her head, pressing against his chest. And only yours, she teased, a grin playing on her lips. Rexus paused a few steps behind, his icy gaze softening into something warmer, a subtle acknowledgement of her choice, of the bond now unbreakable between her and Kajin. It's exactly as it should be, he murmured, voice low. The forest seemed to exhale around them, the wind singing through the pines, the snow sparkling with quiet magic. Mira inhaled, feeling the rhythm of her heart and Kajin's perfectly aligned, and she knew she had found her home. her place in a world wild, dangerous, and beautiful, forever bound to the one she had chosen, fully and without hesitation.